Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, we're taking a look at a bona fide classic from the first American group to have 8 consecutive gold albums. We're talking about The Doors, and the album is L.A. Woman. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Erik Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff, and Erik, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. My name is Dean, and I'm here with Erik.
Hello, Dean.
Hello, Erik. How are you? I'm doing well. How's things?
Good.
Good. Awesome. So we are talking about The Doors and the album L.A. Woman. So let's get the stats rolling and get that out of the way so we can get to the meat and potatoes. So this album came out in 1971, recorded very quickly, December 1970 to January 71. So this was really knocked out quickly. Produced by The Doors and their engineer, Bruce Botnick, which is something a little different. Normally, they always worked with Paul Rothchild, who was known really for his work with Janis Joplin also. Paul Rothchild was not too happy with what he was hearing. He was frustrated getting the Doors, trying to get them to work and get together, and then he was still kind of reeling from the passing of Janis Joplin. So they kind of separated, decided we're going to do it ourselves. This hit number 9 on the Billboard charts, which is nice. 36 weeks on the charts altogether, and 2 singles came from this album: "Lover Madly," which hit number 11, and "Riders on the Storm," which hit number 14. And the album eventually went double platinum in 87. But like I said in the open, this is the first American band to have 8 consecutive gold albums. And gold is 500,000 or more. So that's a pretty decent stat for a group like this. You don't really think that, because they really didn't put out that many studio albums, but there's also some compilations and a live album in there. So when you stack it all together, there was 8 consecutive albums that reached that status. So pretty neat. One of my favorites, The Doors, absolutely. And this album is a gem. So how did you, what's your connection to The Doors?
Very early on, actually. I had read No One Here Gets Out Alive before I even got into the band. It was more sort of I was more curious about them. A mutual friend of ours, I was just speaking to him the other day. He was regaling me of the time he got his license, drove to Vermont to visit some family up there, some cousins, came back a Doors fan. I remember him pretty much showing us, hey, check these guys out, whatever. And you were kind of like not a fan at first. You were kind of scoffing, like in a nice.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, you got into it in a really big way.
Yeah, and that's usually what happens with me.
Yeah,
is I will poo-poo something and be like, oh, whatever, I'm not into that mainly because I'll be into something else.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, when I was into the Beatles, it was the Beatles and there was nothing else. And you think, after you get into the Beatles, you start to think, well, there can't be anything after this. This is like the greatest band. Like, I don't foresee myself getting into anything. So, in a weird way, I kind of closed myself off.
Yeah.
And then you're right. Our friend was into the Doors, not an Uber fan, but certainly was definitely listening to them a lot, playing it in the car and checking it out. And of course, everybody knows the hits, and they've got a lot. And those are rock staples. Those are FM radio staples. You can't get away from the Doors.
Yeah.
And then this is the punch Dean in the face part of my story. is our friend. I was with him down in the city. This was in the mid 80s. And we went, it was like Christmas time. So I think we went to go see the tree in New York City, Rockefeller Plaza. And we're walking and he's like, "Oh my God, look over there. Do you know who that is?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "That's Ray Manzarek from The Doors." And I'm like, So you know what? If like future me is going to go back and find young me and just kick the crap out of him. And then when I show up in the new reality, I'll have like a black eye and a missing tooth when I go meet Ray Manzarek, but I'll be a lot more grateful because when we did meet him, I was kind of I'm like folding my arms. I'm like, "Yeah, hey, Merry Christmas," And our friend was just so psyched, but I wasn't into them, so it didn't connect with me until much later. I'm like, "Oh man, wow, I blew it."
From what I recall, though, it really wasn't that much later but I don't know what the moment was that clicked with you. I don't know. Was it Jim? Was it Morrison himself? Was it the band? What was it that really?
It was the song. It was the song "Peace Frog."
Okay.
I was driving with our friend, and he was playing the tape "Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine," which is a compilation.
Yes. Yeah.
And "Peace Frog" came on, and all it takes sometimes is one song, and that song just kind of like hit me in such a weird way. I'm like, wow, they just hadn't heard anything like it. You can't go by "Touch Me" and "Hello, I Love You," which everybody's familiar with. But when I heard "Peace Frog," it just kind of hit me in a weird way, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I think I need to go a little deeper on this. And then I got that cassette. It's like a double cassette, so it had a bunch of stuff on it. And then, much like you did and every other person back then, is No One Here Gets Out Alive, which is written by Danny Sugarman and Jerry Hopkins. Danny Sugarman was like a young kid who had access to the Doors when he was very young, has worked in the fan club or was hanging around in the office. So then they wrote this book, which was a monster back in the early 80s, late 70s, kind of all the tawdry details about him and everything, and really building up the legend. So everyone really picked up on it then.
Yeah.
I got around to reading the book, and then you just get absorbed. You fall into the legend, and you then start listening to the music.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was, I don't think I ever really absorbed that. I kind of lived vicariously through you guys with the music. The music, they were always there. We talked about Zeppelin in the other episode, and as being one in the Doors and Zeppelin have that in common, where they're that kind of band where I kind of took them for granted that they're, just a great band. I never really got into the whole mystique of Jim Morrison. I didn't get it. I thought, what's up with this guy? I was more into the band. I was more into Robbie Krieger playing these weird guitar riffs, and I was really enamored with that stuff. And Manzarek having to play the bass notes with his organ, and Densmore playing Latin beats and weird time signatures and stuff. That's how I kind of got into the band, was the music. But Morrison, I was like, is this guy like, I don't know, is he full of crap, or is he just is it really? I just didn't get the whole mystique of him. I didn't buy into it until much later.
Probably, I would say it's probably equal parts BS and genuine mystique.
Of course, yeah.
And you hit on it too. Is the band The Doors?
Yeah,
it's so easy for Jim Morrison, especially since he passed away, and he's just has this legendary look about him, and everybody sees him on posters. You see Jim Morrison, and then the other guys just look like guys off the street, but those were accomplished musicians. Robbie Krieger, absolutely. The guy was trained in flamenco playing. So when he brings that type of style to rock music, that's when the electricity happens, when someone takes a different take on it. And John Densmore, Latin influenced, jazz influenced. So he's trying to push his kind of agenda, as it were, into it to get his feelings through. And then you've got Ray Manzarek, who's really kind of bluesy. Yeah, he plays those bass lines with his left hand, and then he's just pounding away at the keyboard. So you have this eclectic mix of four guys that come together, and then you've got Jim Morrison, was spending all his time reading poetry, studying the poets, and he's a bona fide poet. I mean, he does, his lyrics are poetry, and you put all that together, and you get something like the first album, which really was like this, came out right in the middle of like the summer of love, 67, psychedelia. You got Jefferson Airplane, you have all that stuff going on, and you have the Doors in there. So they're talking about all this weird imagery and really strange instrumentation and songs like The End. And you get, and I could see where people might not want to go down there. They'll listen to Light My Fire, because the hits really kind of almost stand out from the albums. Not that the albums are so weird, but there is a nugget on the first album, which was kind of a tell, is they did a cover of Backdoor Man, which is a blues song. And that little nugget from there and all that other psychedelia and all the other stuff they were doing is the through line to LA Woman, I think, because they started in that genre with the really trippy lyrics and the 8-minute songs. And as they progressed through their discography, because they put out like 6 albums from 67 to 71, so very prolific, but their growth was also significant.
Yeah.
From one album to the next. And by the time we get to LA Woman, which we're going to be talking about, they were a different band. They had come through the psychedelia. They had come through it and made it through. And not a lot of bands do. And they had made it into the 70s. And I think that's actually one of the tragedies of the Doors, is that on this album, I feel that they had found it. Like they had gone through all that stuff. And this album, they were able to meld the poetry, the playing, the blues. It finally came out like we're a blues band. Because that's what this album is. So they went through all that stuff and came through the other side the way they started, which they started with a blues song and they ended as a blues band.
Yeah. Well, Morrison himself was a bona fide blues enthusiast. So, so a lot of, I think they covered, how many covers I think they recorded maybe 3 or 4 covers for
on LA Woman
session.
There's just one. Yeah.
But there were some singles that, some obviously outtakes that didn't make it. And there were, I think, 2 or 3 covers on there. So he, it was almost like he got to do that. He got to, pay tribute to some of his heroes. And this was a much more scaled back album though.
Absolutely.
Think about it.
Yeah. They had, because they had kicked Rothschild to the curb.
Yeah.
They didn't feel the need to have to go into a studio. So they got their rehearsal space and they said, let's make the studio here. Let's just kind of get it together. We'll work at our own pace. They were free from having a producer really guide, because Rothschild really guided them and really was directing the sound for them. He was the one suggesting horns on the Soft Parade and there's nothing wrong with that. But now they were free from that. And it's like, let's just get together. Let's make a studio in our rehearsal space. Famously, vocals were recorded in the bathroom, in the bathroom doorway. So really, this is like one of the original like lo-fi recordings. This was kind of like down and dirty, and let's get it done.
Very little overdubbing. It was like they were rehearsing. It was like they were sort of capturing the live aspect in the studio, like just recording the band playing. Feel like it's the band on equal footing. Morrison, it's like they're gelling it. This overall sound is a lot warmer.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right about that.
Yeah.
And that's always what makes me sad is when I listen to this. It's such a great album.
Yeah.
And it was like everyone saying, oh, they were going to be breaking up, possibly, but because this was the last album that they had to make with Elektra Records, their last of their contract. But they were talking about what was going to happen after. So I like to think that there was more, because this was such a relaxed atmosphere. From what I've read, Morrison, famously alcoholic and extreme lifestyle, wasn't really drinking as much during the recording of this. And he was much more involved and much more engaged. And I think that comes through on this, especially when you hear the difference in his voice. I mean, unfortunately, his lifestyle wrecked his voice, but I think it wrecked it. If there's a right way to wreck your voice, this was it.
It suits the music.
Yeah, because if you listen to Backdoor Man on the first album, it's a young guy singing it.
Yeah.
When you listen to this album, his voice is like sandpaper being pulled across gravel. And that is the voice for the blues. I mean, he, unfortunately, what he did to his voice, and I don't know if that was on purpose, because he did have problems with the image of the guy in the leather pants and no shirt and thin and long hair, that he started to gain weight, and he grew a big bushy beard.
Mm-hmm.
And the record label was still, before this came out, they put out a compilation called 13 of their greatest hits. And lo and behold, on the cover was the young Jim Morrison with the long hair and the leather pants, fully highlighted, when that's not how Morrison looked.
Right.
So he was trying to make that change.
Yeah, even the album cover, like I was saying about them being on equal footing, even the album cover reflects that, because it's not the big portrait of Jim like the first album. Like it's like you see his face pretty much takes up half the cover, and the rest of the band are kind of squeezed in on the side. This is like a portrait of all four, very evenly spaced. They're just so it kind of reflects the mood, the loose feel, the sort of gelling together. They actually sound like they're having a great time playing this music on this album.
Yeah, and they did have a little bit of help, and this was really a great thing that they did, is they brought in Mark Beno, who's kind of a session guy. He's done a lot of other work, but they brought him on rhythm guitar for a couple of tracks. But the important thing they did was they brought in Jerry Sheff to play bass. Jerry Sheff is a very good bass player, really mostly known for his work with Elvis Presley. He was in the touring band from 69 to 73, and then again. So this guy's a consummate pro.
Mm-hmm.
Little nugget of trivia: Jerry Sheff, his son is Jason Sheff, who replaced Peter Cetera in Chicago and also plays the bass.
Oh wow!
There's a little nugget of wisdom.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so Jerry Sheff was big with the TCB band, so well respected by Elvis. So they got him in just to really nail down the rhythm section, and it really helped keep everything moving. And especially when you're playing the blues and those, when you want to get those songs into a groove, getting a bass player in there really helps, and it really helped lock everything down.
I totally agree with that. I mean, that's when I said the album sounds warm. It's because of that bass. It really bottoms that album out and gives it the sort of weight that it needs to play blues music. You really need those low ends and those, to get that stuff out. But yeah, I mean, Morrison was a huge fan of Elvis Presley too, so he was elated to have this guy on board. I don't know. It feels like at first I might not have been my favorite, back in the day. Like hearing it for the first time, it was so different compared to the first album. My personal favorite for a time was Strange Days, because I was really into the sort of psychedelic stuff more, but as I got older, I think I appreciate this album a lot more. It might very well be my favorite at this point. So
yeah, I skewed towards Waiting for the Sun, and then I skipped Soft Parade, Roadhouse Blues. Put them on this path, which Roadhouse Blues is the album before this, and that really kind of got them going towards this direction.
Yeah,
and then LA Woman, and just to kind of close out the backstory a little bit, Morrison died 3 months after this album was released. Yeah. So they did record it. He left for Paris. The rest of the Doors thought that was a good idea for him to go get out of town for a while. There was a lot of legal troubles mounting with him also. Indecent exposure charge he was found guilty of. So there was a lot of external pressures going on. They were able to get this album done. He flew off to Paris, ended up passing away. Death certificate said a heart attack, but there was no autopsies done. So there was really, I read a book about it a long time ago that it could have been, people say heroin. The book I read was like he had some type of stomach thing associated with all the drinking. But what his death did is he was basically the fourth member of what's called the 27 Club.
Mm-hmm.
And those were within less than 2 years, 4 major rock icons died, all at the age of 27. Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones.
Jimi Hendrix.
Followed by Janis Joplin. Okay. Then Hendrix. And Hendrix died like less than a month after Joplin.
Yeah.
And then Morrison died like 6 months later. That's unfathomable. I was trying to think of what the equivalent of that would be, of Brian Jones, who was a guitarist for the Stones, Janis Joplin, Hendrix, and Morrison, all dying within the three of those, Joplin, Hendrix, Morrison, died within a year. Brian Jones was a little bit earlier than that. So, and that's where this legend of the 27 Club, because Kurt Cobain ended up dying when he was 27. And there's a lot of other music artists and some film actors that died. So they say it's a curse or whatever, but just the impact on music at that point, I can't even fathom it. I don't know what it would be equivalent to. I wouldn't want to pick 3 people dying within a year of that magnitude, but back then it must have been shattering.
I often wonder what they would be sounding like today had they lived. What would Morrison be doing today? Can you picture him in the 80s? No way. I can't imagine him making that transition. And even Hendrix. Well, Hendrix was kind of steering in a more sort of funk direction. I kind of feel like he would have been like Prince in a sense, but so he probably would have made that transition a little bit easier. But like Morrison, I don't know. I just can't. Yeah. I can't imagine what they would have done.
Yeah, I mean they were on a certain path, so they maybe would have moved away from the more commercial stuff too. Yeah. So it's there's a lot of information if you want to read about all of this about Joplin, Hendrix, Morrison. There's a wealth and trove of information and books written about all of them, so you can kind of really get a feel for what was going on. So let's jump into the album, LA Woman, and it starts off. And this is just a great. I'm sorry, I just love this album so much. It's such a great album. What this album. I wrote a blog post a few years ago about music and seasons and how some albums for me, I so strongly associate with a season that I almost can't listen to them outside of it. And this album associates not only summer, but very humid and hot, like sweltering days. Like you listen to this on a hot, sweltering day and you feel the impact of these songs.
Yeah, I agree. It's
just kind of like that. It just has that feel, has that like thick, humid summer day when you're sweating and you have the fan on, not the air conditioning, and it's blowing on you and you're listening to this album. And that's what this is. You feel the heat. So it starts off with The Changeling, and the lyrics literally tell it all, addressing Morrison on the Changeling, see me change. That's him. He changed. He went from this slim rock god to this paunchy, overweight, bearded poet, cigar smoking guy. Never been so broke that I couldn't leave town. And he did leave town. He ended up going to Paris. The groove on this song is just starts right off. You're in for something special when this song kicks in.
Yeah, it's amazing, and the bass line gets you too.
It just starts pumping from the beginning.
Funk, and it's great.
So good, so good. It's just one of those. It just kind of sets the tone, and it does. It doesn't have that overproduced feel. It doesn't have the shininess of like the Soft Parade with Touch Me and that overproduced. It's really got that thick feeling to it.
Yeah,
and it sounds like 4 or 5 guys in a. It literally does. I think mission accomplished.
Yeah,
it sounds like 4 or 5 guys in a room.
This is a guy, they're just jamming out, and even though it's a structured song, it feels like it could have gone on longer.
And that's some of these songs they did not have coming into the sessions. So some of these songs were worked up while they were there, which was a little bit different for them. Also, usually they came in and they had some stuff prepared, but for this album, some of it, not all of it. But some of it, there is some stuff that is actually dates back to a few years, which we'll get into. Some of it was worked up in the studio, and you definitely get the feeling for that. That you're right. Like The Changeling sounded like this was a jam session, and then they said we have this groove. Let's put some words to it, which is awesome.
Yep.
And then next you've got the hit, Love Her Madly, and this was the song. This was actually the song that Paul Rothchild heard and made him say, I can't work with you guys. This is cocktail music. I don't like it. And I don't know. He must have been off his rocker or something, because Love Her Madly is just a great song and written by Robbie Krieger. And Robbie Krieger, besides being the guitar player, extraordinaire. He was like the secret lyricist also. He was kind of like the secret weapon. Everyone gives Morrison so much credit for writing. Robbie Krieger wrote Light My Fire. Jim Morrison did not write that song, but he is so like adept. He knows his artist, that he was able to come up with those lyrics like Funeral Pyre and all that kind of stuff that Morrison would use. He was able to kind of emulate it, not to the extent that Morrison did, but enough that you didn't realize that someone else was writing it.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote Love Me Two Times. So he was like the hit maker for them, really.
Yeah, pretty much. And they were, pretty straightforward. It's about breaking up or, love or, but it, I think about the Frank Whaley in the movie, the Oliver Stone film, and he's just like, it's didn't really want to write about snakes and
snakes or fire
and
trying to keep up with you.
Yeah. So, but you're right. These songs were just great, and they had great riffs. They all have wonderful licks. I mean, they're just, he's one of the best.
Yeah,
and definitely.
And the Changeling and Lover Madly kind of really are a pair, because they're two up-tempo songs. Mm-hmm. The Changeling has really got that chugging, and Lover Madly kind of has that groove also. It's more of it's more that piano groove that they have going on, like the electric piano groove.
Yeah.
With Lover Madly, but you find yourself getting into it, and again, I always say that the track listing and track order is so important. And these two songs really together, kind of kicking off the album, really give you an indication, and the way they sound gives you an indication of where this is going. It's simple. It's not crazy. They're not that the Doors did do some crazy stuff. They used to use, they would use effects and all that other kind of crazy, and echoes. This is not that. I think this is them landing. This was like the destination from when they left in the first album. This is where they were, I think, destined to end up.
Yeah, it's the perfect bookend to the first record, which is arguably one of the greatest debut albums of all time. But yeah, they kind of landed back. They landed home. They came full circle, I feel. Yeah. When you were talking about Backdoor Man, I mean, this whole album is Backdoor Man, essentially. They just came full on.
And they do it themselves too. And that's the key is we've talked about Led Zeppelin and how they co-opted a number of songs on Led Zeppelin 2 that they didn't give credit for. On this one, there's only one cover, and they're given credit for it, but there are some straight up blues songs written by the Doors that are just can run with the Bulls on these, right? I mean, the next one is been down so long. And that's just a straight up blues song. Mm-hmm. That's just and Morrison's voice is ready for this kind of music. That's the thing is, had he done this 5 years ago when his voice wasn't wrecked, I don't think it would have been as authentic.
No, it definitely came into its own. And I don't know. I mean, making those decisions did he? You can't say that he did it on purpose, just to get that feel. Maybe he did. Who knows? Maybe that's part of it. But that's one of those things that just gratuitous that it happened in that sense. There are other artists who were like that too, that they didn't feel like they deserved to cover some of these songs or blues songs because they just weren't good enough. They just couldn't emulate until later on in their career when they got much older and their voices changed,
Yeah. And this was in a span of like 4 years though for him. So he rose quickly, and really what he was doing took his toll. And then it follows up with another really blues song. And this song is just, it's Cars Hiss By My Window. And this song is in no rush. This is like the hottest day of the year type song that you just feel the heat just rising from the sidewalk on this song. It just feels like it's sweating out, and it's just humid, and you're in a room and the fan is going, like I said before, it really, for me, evokes just a strong sense of like humidity, and it's hot, and it's not swampy. Depressing, but yeah. And this song is just in no rush to get there. This song really takes its time. It's not a fast blues song. It is a slow blues song, but it just, they just march along and they just go through it. Mm-hmm. and they take you through, and it's just it would seem like a song this slow might kind of slow, kind of stop the album a little bit.
Not at all.
But I don't think so.
No.
Because you're getting something different from them, and you're hearing something so different than what the Doors were doing. It doesn't sound fake. It doesn't sound forced.
No.
And that's the key. If they were trying to do let's do a blues album, I don't think it wouldn't work.
Which, a lot of rock and roll bands did try that. And, I can't, and frankly, I can't stand that. When I think of people like Aerosmith doing, Honkin' on Bobo, like that came like much later, I couldn't stand albums like that because it didn't sound authentic to me. But yeah, everything was in place with this one. And especially if you ever needed a good example, that's that song right there. It sets the moods, like you say. It's that real heavy, swampy feel, and it's perfect. But
you're right. They came to it organically.
Yeah.
This wasn't a let's do our, we're enamored with the blues now, so let's do our blues album, and then we'll do our, country album or whatever.
And it didn't feel like there was a whole lot of effort put into it.
Yeah.
It was very natural. It sounds like a blues band.
Just want to take a quick moment and thank you for listening. Your support means so much to Erik and I. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please subscribe. It would be awesome. And if you're using Apple Podcasts, a rating and review would be doubly awesome. And your feedback is invaluable. So let's keep the conversation going on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast. You can let us know how we're doing. If you have any requests, you can post them there. Or if you just want to talk about one of the episodes or ask a question, we'd love to interact with you, and we absolutely look forward to it. Thanks. Let's get back to the show. After that is...
the masterpiece.
The masterpiece. And the funny thing is, interesting bit of trivia also is on Spotify. The top 10 songs that are streamed or listened to by the Doors, three of them are from this album. And no other album has that many. So we're talking an album that is just historic in not only in the Doors, but just in rock music, because LA Woman, the song just kind of starts, it's got a little effect in it, and then it just starts motoring. It just starts thumping, and it just starts pumping. Mm-hmm. And it's, I've mentioned it a lot of times. I mentioned, hey, listen to this song when you're driving. This is another one.
It's a perfect.
This is it. I mean, if you've never been to LA or California, this song will get you there. This song will make you feel like you've been there. It absolutely does. It just moves. It kicks. It's got a great vocal. It's Morrison's vocal is kind of a little excited, and he's not the greatest singer. And that's the thing about Morrison. He is not a technical singer whatsoever, and he's not a horrible singer. And especially with the shape that his voice is in, it fits. It just fits. It's just so strange, the difference and the contrast of the way he used to sound to the way he sounds on this album. But it's exactly what this song is needed. His voice is matured because it's been so ravaged. He's just ready for this type of music. And yeah, he doesn't do a lot of crazy singing. He doesn't do any high singing or anything like that, or any high harmony vocals or anything. The Doors don't do backing vocals, really. It's just him. And this is a rip-roaring song.
It's like starting a car. You talk about driving, but the song itself sounds like a car to me. Like the beginning, you're turning the ignition and then backing out of the drive and and then all of a sudden you're gaining speed and it just kicks in into high gear and then boom. And then you're like the middle part, then you kind of swerve it into traffic, where it starts getting a little jazzier, and it's like all of a sudden there's all this congestion and whatnot going on. But
this song breaks down a little bit before, but before that you get some really soaring guitar work from Robbie Krieger. Mm-hmm. He's just all over this, just all over this song, and his playing is just it's so unique that it makes it very distinctive. Because he plays with his fingers and he kind of strikes down and picks up with his fingers, you get a unique tone that other players don't get, and he's able to do a lot with it. And that's one of the things that also made the Doors unique is it just wasn't some guys behind them that were playing. These guys all brought something different to it. And Densmore's jazzy playing, and he would throw in little extra things into what he was playing. And then Manzarek would just kind of anchor it with the organ when needed be. So that was the thing is they toured so much and played so much together. They all understood each other. And they understood where someone will take a breather and someone else will kind of come in.
Right.
And where they can put those pieces in and do it live and record it live and get it done without having to overdub it or do anything crazy. And then so in LA Woman, you do get that break, and then you start to get Jim Morrison singing a refrain of Mr. Mojo Rising, which became one of his nicknames among the Lizard King, Mr. Mojo Rising. A little tidbit of trivia again. If you take the letters in Mr. Mojo Rising, you scramble them or you unscramble them or re-scramble them, and you get Jim Morrison. Mm-hmm. So it literally is a pseudonym. And then once you get the breakdown, then it picks back up again, and that same energy that was at the beginning of the song is there, and it kind of sees you out, and it's just such a great song, and it was covered by Billy Idol. He took a crack at it. He was kind of in his, he was in the Doors. He was supposed to in the Oliver Stone film, The Doors. He was supposed to play a bigger role than he did. He was supposed to play the role that Michael Madsen ended up playing, but he got into a motorcycle accident, and that's when you see him in the movie, he's got a cane. He literally needed the cane. So he went through his Doors period also.
Yeah.
And he did a cover of LA Woman, which was okay. It wasn't horrible.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard one to do. But Billy Idol is probably, you're not going to get much closer to somebody taking a crack at it that is has the guts enough to do it.
Right.
And it sounded of its time. It was in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever it was. So it has that glossy feel to it.
And there was the music video that came out. Manzarek had put that together. It was just a tribute to L.A., right? It was just images of L.A., which is really what the album's about in its sense. So it came kind of full circle there too. Like, Manzarek realized the visual aspect of the album in just that video.
Yeah, that video is a great companion. It came out in the 80s. And it's a great companion piece to it. It does give you the feel, and it does match pretty well what the intent of the song is.
Mm-hmm.
So that is side one. Really, they kind of laid down the blueprint right here for the rest of the album. So when you flip it over, the first song you get is called L'America, and it was actually it was supposed to be written for a film called Zabriskie Point, but they ended up not using it. So in its original form, it was called Latin America, the song, but now this is called La America with L' America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got some tempo changes. This is kind of it starts off kind of slow, and it's got some keyboardy stuff, and this is probably about as ambitious as they get, I think, with just kind of some atmospheric stuff they throw in there, and then they're changing tempo, and Morrison's fooling around with the lyrics a little bit, making you think he's going to curse in one of the lyrics, and there's a lot there, and then it gets into almost like a carnival type musical break with the organ from Manzarek. So there's a lot there.
Well, I feel like this song, if Backdoor Man was on the first album, which is mostly psychedelic, this song is like Backdoor Man because it's the most psychedelic song on the record, I feel.
Yeah,
you're kind of switching them out there. It's really different from the rest of the album. So is the next song, actually. The next song,
this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite songs.
The song doesn't sound like the Doors, though.
What do you think it sounds like?
I don't know. To me, it sounds like a just. Oh God, what am I thinking? Maybe.
Well, what's the name of the song?
Hyacinth House.
Hyacinth House. Yeah. It's one of my favorites. I for some reason I connected to this one.
It's just so different from
his vocal is very understated.
Yeah.
His vocals are they're very low. He's singing very low, in a low key, and his voice is almost wavering a little bit just because of the way he's singing.
Mm-hmm.
I like a lot of the lyrics, and then there's a little throwaway lyric in the middle where he says, "I see the bathroom is clear," and that's a nod to them that no one's in the bathroom where they were recording. So it's a funny little thing they threw in there. But I like the bass. I love the bass work on this song. Mm-hmm. I like just the rhythm guitar that he plays. The organ is there. This is just really a kind of like a full-fledged door. Like you get a lot in there, and it's a short song. It's not a long song, but there's so much in there, which I gravitated toward this song when I first heard the album.
The opening riff, though, it sounds like, almost recalls, like, it sounds like the band or one of those groups at that time that was like sort of more folky, and it doesn't really evoke what the Doors are usually known for, with these long rhythms and these just sort of like catchy little riffs, and the keyboards don't hit you right away. And I mean, it takes its time and builds up, but it just does not sound like a Doors song. I mean, like typically it's just so different,
Yeah, it's a great one though. I just really like it. It's just it's like a nice mellow song.
Yeah.
And it is almost like a kind of like a palate cleanser, because you've gotten like a lot of blues songs on the other side, and you got LA Woman, and and then Hyacinth House just kind of comes in, it kind of like drifts in.
Yeah.
And it's just like real, like it's just such a, and maybe that's what, maybe I like it because of its placement on the album too, is kind of, you hear America, and that's kind of trippy, and it's a little bit manic because it's got all those different tempos and change, it's like got three different type of like movements to the song.
Yeah.
And then you get through that, and then they kind of just like relax you a little bit and say, we're just going to give you something simple, really nice bass work, straightforward guitar, straightforward organ work, and Morrison just singing just a really almost like a flat vocal, but his voice is just so gruff and just so deep. He's really singing like really low. So yeah, something about we always talk about songs that grab you and something that hooks you outside of the norm. Hyacinth House was it.
Well, there's a very eccentric, not eccentric, but eclectic feel. And for Rothschild to say that this wasn't a creative album in any sense, I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
He was. I think his head was messed up from from losing Janis a little bit. Right. No, honestly, I think it was just kind of probably burnt at that point after everything he was, working with Joplin and working with Morrison. I mean, that's like different sides of the same coin. It couldn't have been easy trying to wrangle them. So he probably just like, I had it.
When critics say like when an album like this, I think a couple did say that it wasn't the most cohesive, but what does that really mean? I like eclectic. I like when every song is a little bit different from one another. And, when you sort of get that same sound going through each song, it makes it more, it makes it pop. It makes it interesting when you go from psychedelia to this sort of like folky kind of thing. And then all of a sudden another blues song comes in, and it's, I love that. I love that on any album that anybody could do.
Yeah. And speaking of straight up blues, right?
Yeah.
Crawling King Snake. I mean, you don't get much more. John Lee Hooker, you don't get much more straight up blues than this.
Yeah.
This is the cover. This is them putting a bona fide blues song. But you know what? The other ones would sit right alongside of, if you played, Been Down So Long, Cars Hiss By My Window, and Crawling King Snake together, you'd be like, oh, okay, who wrote these? And you might guess one person. Because they were really able to not only cover the blues and understand what they liked, they were able to do it on their own too, and put their own kind of spin on it. And it's not crazy, Down So Long and Cars Hiss By My Window are just straight up blues songs, and just can punch with Crawling King Snake. Absolutely.
There's only so many ways you could do real blues. It's very, very straightforward. But yeah, it's impressive to say, those songs are just as good and just as, the same tempo, the same quality. Just this song,
same strong songs
has been covered endlessly through. I mean, there's a lot of blues artists who have done this song over the years, including like Buddy Guy and Eric Clapton, and I think even Stevie Ray Vaughan did it at some point, and a lot of the more contemporary blues artists, of course.
Yeah. It's probably Blues 101. This song is probably is Blues 101. Yeah. And the thing about the other songs that the Doors wrote is it follows the same structure. So they're not trying to reinvent it, but they really understand what it takes to write a good blues song, and they were able to do it. And then they said, well, here's the real deal too. So Crawling King Snake by John Lee Hooker. And that's just there's nothing you can say about it. It's just straight up, there's nothing to it. It's a straight up blues song. And then you get something very interesting, which is the song is called The Wasp. And that's all in caps, WASP, and then in parentheses, Texas Radio and the Big Beat. And this is kind of a song that the lyrics, a lot of it dates back to 1968. And if you go on YouTube, there is some footage of a performance, I think that the Doors did on Danish television or Holland or something over there. And Morrison is sitting down during the performance because he got so blasted the night before that he actually couldn't stand. And he recites the main part of this song, The Wasp, as a poem, as straight up poetry, because that's what it was. And then on that video from that tour in Holland, they go into Love Me Two Times. Mm-hmm. And here, it's a full-fledged song. And it's like a kind of a big, bombastic song. Morrison's voice is kind of booming in it. Maybe there's some echo on it. It just has that, it's really a forceful song.
Yeah. It reminds me of it recalls the beat of it when it first starts. It 5-1.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, 5-1, or when the music's over. Those type. I think it's 5-1. That doom. It has that same kind of feel to it. Yeah.
This is just another showcase for all of them.
Yeah.
You've got Densmore in the back, just kind of laying it down. You've got Krieger with that, just starting off with that rhythm guitar, right? Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun, right? And it just kind of, it just starts pounding. And then Manzarek comes in with the organ. Again, they just knew how to interact with each other and where to place these things. And they just are so smart with it, which is key. It's not a mess. It's not just a jumble of, these guys are all playing. Like, you never really, on this album, you don't really get that, where they're all just kind of playing over each other, and it just becomes like a musical salad of noise.
Like I said, it's effortless. There's just no, feels like there's no effort. I mean, it's great, but it's so loose.
Yeah, it's got a groove. It's just got a nice groove that kind of goes in, and Morrison's voice is kind of like booming the way he's delivering it. So it's really neat. And this is really the most, abstract you get with the lyrics, because this is stuff that was written back then in that period when he was just really prolific with the poetry. So you really get the word imagery in The Wasp. He really puts a lot in there with the lyrics. So there's a lot to digest. So not only vocally you're listening to the lyrics, but then you're getting also the song, and you're just getting the guys behind them just playing their guts out, I think, on this song.
Yeah.
I think they just kind of leave it all out there.
Absolutely. And then my favorite. And then
your favorite, this was the number one most streamed song on Spotify by the Doors. So out of the top 10, this song, Riders on the Storm.
It's my favorite song, period, by the Doors. I just love the way it starts.
It's a great choice.
The move. Of course, the effects, the lightning and the thunder and the rain and all that, it just evokes a real strangeness about it, a sort of sense of dread. But
the lyrics are not happy.
It's such a cool, it sets such a cool mood, and it's so noirish. And it's
very atmospheric.
Yeah,
it starts off with some thunder. And the keyboards are kind of like tinkling, almost like water. It's got like a tinkling sound to it, where he's kind of, Manzarek is just kind of going down the keyboard and just kind of rolling through all the notes. And then he gets to his riff, and that tinkling keyboard is just throughout, and you've got just some really understated guitar work by Robbie Krieger, not blowing it out. Again, just knowing what the song needs and pulling it back when you need to. Everything is it's tastefully done, but the lyric is not good. I mean, it's about a killer on the road, kind of be careful, if you give him a ride, sweet family will die. So it's certainly not it doesn't close the album out on a positive note.
On a high note.
But
this is actually, go ahead.
But the arrangement kind of betrays the lyrics. because the arrangement isn't dark. It's not like a dark sounding song. It's very atmospheric.
It's atmospheric, but yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of does. I mean, like I said, it is a very a strong sense of like dread and noir and kind of like, but I feel it's more, I mean, it's about, a guy on the road. And in the movie, they kind of evoke that. The movie opens, I remember, with that song. And I was so happy about that. This is, oh man, this is great. But to me, it feels more like a song in the city. Like, I could see like rain steaming down on the streets, and it's just, some guy in a trench coat and a hat, like lurking in the shadows. And, it just evokes that kind of imagery.
Yeah, they use it to great effect. The lightning, I mean, the thunder effect and the rain effect. Yeah. And Morrison's vocal is just also very understated. There's some whispering vocal that he's doubling. So yeah, it's kind of it kind of is a gentle kind of end to the album. The album doesn't go out with a bang. It kind of goes out with this really atmospheric song that is just it's unlike anything else on the album. It really is. It's the outlier on this album.
It might be probably the most produced song on the record. There's just a lot of there's a really tasteful amount of reverb on the song. The guitars, sort of that echoey kind of watery feel by Krieger, and Morrison's vocals. The whispering at the very end is the very last thing Morrison would do, would record before he died. So yeah, it almost feels like in a sense, it kind of creeps you out in a way, because he would be dead like 3 months later, and it's almost like a foreboding prophetic feel, like, oh, this is the end, kind of thing. So I don't know. When you think about that, it's like, wow,
Yeah, and that's what makes me so sad, is kind of like, it was like they did it, like they made it, like when I think about, like, God, they made it through. They came through and they evolved. They made it through the psychedelia. They evolved through it, which not a lot of groups did. And they came out into the 70s, into 71, and it's like, oh, okay, this is what it's going to be, And I'm sure Morrison was probably happy with it too, because he was able to shed all that expectation of the Lizard King and the skinny guy and the hair and all that stuff, and it was just kind of like this, heavy set, not fat, but kind of potbelly, bearded poet doing what he wanted, going to Paris and living that life. And then they were going to, there was conversations. They were going to regroup and see what was next. So, it's really the great what if, and it's so kind of disheartening. But we're left with this. So the good news is we don't have a misstep with Morrison. What did happen, though, is after Morrison passed away, the other Doors were kind of left. It's like, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah. And
there was some talk of getting Iggy Pop, because Iggy Pop was with the Stooges at the time, and he was very much in the Morrison mold. There was discussions of maybe getting Iggy Pop to join the Doors, but he actually said, I don't want to do that. So then they decided, well, we'll just carry on as a trio. Krieger had done some singing anyway. Ray Manzarek had done some singing also, some B-sides and some backing stuff. So they're like, all right, we'll just kind of soldier on. So they did put out 2 albums afterwards. One was called Other Voices and Full Circle. So those didn't do much. The Doors would have a resurgence around 78, because what happened is just before Morrison died and before they recorded this album, he had gone into the studio just to record his poetry, just to sit down and just read his poetry dry and record it. So the Doors had got back together and said, let's the 3 of us put some music to the poetry. Some people weren't too thrilled with that. You're kind of bastardizing what he did. But what came out of it was an album called An American Prayer, which was Morrison's poetry put to music and in a produced way. And it was a big hit. A lot of people were exposed to it. That and the book, No One Here Gets Out Alive, coming out very close to each other, was kind of like a resurgence of everybody experiencing him again. Then the other resurgence was in 91 when the Doors movie came out. When Oliver Stone, Val Kilmer, everyone was crazy about Val Kilmer, how much he sounded like him, because he did his own singing in there in the live stuff. So that was, Morrison kind of resurged, and they also were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame pretty early on. So they were well respected, absolutely well respected.
And then you go into the 2000s, and then Bruce Botnick decided to remaster all of the albums, and with these really great stereo, like new stereo mixes, which I thought it gave a whole nother take on the music itself. It sounded modern. It sounded more like in the period, in the decade. And so that was great too. So it was just a rejuvenating thing, but I do prefer the original, mixes overall, like especially on vinyl. But those remasters were really interesting and really cool and there's like faster tempos and like speeding things up and just making it so much like the music just pop again. I thought it was great.
Yeah. And then Manzarek and Krieger also decided to tour again. They said, let's take this out on the road, because it was a little like a VH1 Storytellers or some type of show like that a while back, where they had all these different vocalists playing with the Doors. It was Manzarek, Krieger, and Densmore, and they had Pat Monahan from Train, and they had all these different artists, and Ian Astbury from the Cult, and all these things, and it did kind of like a tribute thing. And then they said, you know what, this is actually kind of fun. Let's take this out on the road. John Densmore wasn't really into it, so they got Stuart Copeland to play, and they got Ian Astbury from the Cult, who was a kind of a Doors disciple himself, and they went out as the Doors of the 21st century or something like that. And then Densmore sued and said, listen, I'm not having that. You're not using the Doors name whatsoever. So then they just kind of changed it. And that was like in the early 2000s. And, they were touring and kind of spreading the word again, and kind of getting it out there to varying degrees of success. But it kind of kept the music, on the forefront. Absolutely.
Yeah, he wasn't a fan of that, which prompted a book from him himself, Riders on the Storm, which I thought was really good too, which was a much more sort of personal account of what happened.
Yeah, because John Densmore was Densmore was more the quiet. I mean, they were all kind of quiet, but he was more into like meditation and he was into acting. I read that book also, and he was kind of like almost from an observer's point of view of what was going on at the time too. Mm-hmm. Like he was kind of he almost wrote it like as an out of body thing. Like he was observing what was happening.
Did you get to see them live? Did you get to see that show?
No, I didn't. Nah, I wasn't really, I wasn't too keen on it. I'm like, I could pass on it. Yeah. Because Ian Astbury isn't the strongest vocalist live. So it's kind of like, no, he's great. He's great on tape, and he's great on vinyl and great in the studio, but live, I don't think he has the longevity to do it. So depending on when you would see them in the tour, you might have varying degrees of enjoyment. So I took a pass on it, but they remastered the Doors catalog a couple times, because I'd gotten one of the remasters where they had brought up different vocal parts and had brought up guitar parts, and then Botnick did it again, like in 2016 or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the remaster? I have like a earlier, like a 25th anniversary remaster, which I kind of dug, because they would bring up some vocal phrasings that were brought down in the mix or cut out. And
well, that's what I'm talking about.
That's the same one. Okay. Yeah. And those really, those I dug.
Light My Fire was like really fast, and like it really popped. There were a lot more high end to it, and it just popped. Like it sounded like a modern day tune almost. But yeah, he did remaster of the catalog. It sounded much cleaner, but I prefer the old vinyl. I like Light My Fire. That's slow. It's like, it's really heavy. It's really low end kind of feel to it. I prefer that version. I actually got my son into the Doors. He became a huge fan. And I remember a while back you had commented when I told you this. You actually said it was like kind of a shame that he would be a Doors fan, and there really wasn't anything out there at the time that was like sort of like his band, that he would have to be into a band that I liked or was old. But he's an obsessed fan. He loves the whole. Yeah, that's what I say. So we actually went to see.
I knew he was my favorite.
We actually went to see the Experience Hendrix tour, where because Robbie Krieger was playing. So I was like, oh, we got to go. So we went, and I was just so stoked to just hear him play. Unfortunately, the experience wasn't that great because Cesar Rojas from Los Lobos came out and he was kind of like overplaying Robbie Krieger because they were playing together. And Rojas was just so loud that he was drowning Krieger out. I was like, oh, come on.
Amateur.
That was the moment of the show that I wanted to see so badly. And it was like, oh, really? And no disrespect to Rojas. I love Los Lobos, but come on, I wanted to hear Krieger. So
cool. Well, I'm glad that again, everything old is new again. Like I say, all music is new if you never heard it before. Yeah. So it's always a new experience. So I'm going to say then, since your son is into it, I'm going to say this album has aged well. It's
absolutely.
It doesn't sound totally 60s because it wasn't in the 60s, even though the Doors were mainly prolific in the 60s. This was a 71, and it sounds of its time. But because it's bluesy and they're not using any psychedelic kind of trickery that would used on the other ones, it's not as it doesn't sound as dated because it's so lo-fi and because the production is so low key. I think it's able to endure even longer.
Yeah, it's
got legs.
Fine wine. It's because it's I consider one of the great blues rock records. I would definitely put it up there with the likes of the other albums of the period. But then you consider there's a lot of bands out there today who are showing such a reverent return to rock's roots by playing a lot of this blues kind of rock kind of stuff, and a lot of these sort of indie bands out there playing sort of folk and going back to those and it's a much more stripped down sound that people are actually using analog equipment in certain cases,
getting back to the basics.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not. If again, all music it's all good. Yeah. So that's LA Woman. This is highly recommended. One of my favorites, and I know it's one of Erik's favorites too. And it is just a great listen. It's rocking. It's bluesy. It's unfortunately the swan song of the band. Mm-hmm. We didn't get to find out what would come after, but if this was the last one, that's not a bad thing either to go out on. So definitely check it out. Share it with everybody if you haven't heard it, or if again, it's got three hits on it. So if you've never listened to LA Woman, you're already like a third of the way there or so. So give it a spin. It's a great one. If you don't want to listen to it now, definitely check it out in the summer. It's definitely got that feel to it, and I highly recommend it. I can't recommend this one enough. This is like one of my top albums of all time. Mm-hmm. So this is basically a legendary band's final release, and we'll kind of leave it there. And I think it's at this point it'll speak for itself when you listen to it. That's going to do it for the 3324 podcast. Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support. Find us on social media. We're at Facebook at 3324 podcast. We're on Instagram at 3324 podcast. Also, let us know what you want to hear from us. If you want us to cover an album or a movie and check something out, or what are your favorite Doors albums or songs? Let us know. We love to interact with you. Mm-hmm. So until next time, I'm Dean, and for Erik, you've been listening to 3324 podcast. Thank you very much, and we will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Erik Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.